that bondage and let go of those issues. There's a missionary. He came over and to our church and actually had this really good analogy about this. Is they're building a fire, and he was observing how the locals would completely clear out the ash and from the old fire in order to build the perfect new fire. And he asked him about that, and he goes, "Why don't you just throw the logs on the new logs on top of the old logs?" And you're not really going to get a proper fire that way. And I think a lot of the times that's what we try to do, right? We try to put new on top of our old and expect the old just to kind of get washed away, when we really need to clear out the old stuff first, right? Like, get out some of those bad habits and then try to put on that new. That way the fire can actually take place while we're just trying to build on the new, and shocked at some of the times that the old stuff kind of creeps in. So I think we need to fully, in Christian terms, right, we need to die to our old selves, fully break the chains and fully remove ourselves from that bondage, and realize that, we are free from that bondage. And I think a lot of the time that Christians, we live life like Jesus is still on the cross and that the tomb is full. When in all reality, the only thing on the cross is our sins, right? And in reality, right, Jesus is off the cross and he's out of the tomb, and he freed us from those sins and he freed us from that bondage. So we need to live life like we are free from that bondage and free from the chains of sin. And remember that the truth is that Jesus set us free, and that we don't need to keep returning back to the vomit, right? We don't need to keep being that way, because in all reality, we actually have the chains broken. We just got to live life, and we got to remove our old selves and live like the tomb is empty. And I heard that in a pastor preaching one time, and I really liked what he said, because I think it's so true. It's true to my life for a long time, is that we live life like we're still chained to sins, and that that Jesus is still on the cross. And that really hit with me lately. And so I really think that applies to why we stay in the valley, is really how we view our view of Jesus. As some of us need to change on how we view Jesus. Also, with listening to sermons and reading some books, there's a couple books that I really liked. There's one by Craig Groeschel, and I really highly recommend a lot of his books, maybe all of them. And the first one I listened to is called "Winning the War in Your Mind." And there's this is another analogy about how we live life. And so there's this example of this dog with an electric fence in the backyard, right, to kind of the boundaries of the yard. And the dog will go out and get shocked, and then eventually learn, right, that hey, if I go to the boundary of the yard, I'm going to get shocked. And after a while, right, he stopped venturing to the boundaries of the yard, and the owner actually took off the shock collar. And the dog still stayed within the boundary of the yard, even though the boundary, the shocking collar was removed. And kind of tying it back to how we view Jesus, right, like the tomb is empty, right? And we still lived chained, right? We're kind of like that dog. We still live like, there's a boundary in that yard. I've got the shock collar still on. And so we still live life in the boundaries and still in that valley, because we're not living a life that, hey, Jesus removed that boundary. We removed that sin, removed those chains, right? You can go outside of that. And so that analogy, the tomb analogy, I really feel like kind of sums up at least how a lot of the time I lived. And some of the struggles that I can see a lot of Christians, a lot of other people living, is that we're still living within the electric fence boundary. So in last week's episode, I talked about to get out of the valley, we need to focus on Jesus, right? And I heard another example about focusing on Jesus and how we get out of the valley. This one came from a book by Mark Batterson, and I also read a lot of Mark Batterson books. I think like him and Craig Groeschel really have changed my Christian walk in terms of how I learn, how I grow. Their books I listen to those while I run. So I kind of add God into my exercise, which I've mentioned before. And a lot of the time I'm reading their books because they really help me grow as a Christian. So the book is, I think he has this example in a lot of his books, like Chase the Lion, and I want to say it was still in the Chase the Lion. And the book, or the person, the example is Florence Chadwick. She's a swimmer, and she had a goal of swimming from the Catalina Island to the California coastline. The waters were through shark-infested waters, and so she had like a little team with her. That way they can watch out for sharks and pull her in if she was tired. So after about 15 hours of swimming, the big thick fog settled in, and she couldn't see where she was going. She was growing tired, and without being able to see the coastline, she gave up. She told her crew to pull her in, and so they did, only to discover she was only like a mile away from the shoreline, and so she gave up about a mile off the coast. So we do that too, right? Where we get close to the site, right? The end is in sight. The end of the valley is in sight, and yet we let it go, right? We give up, we revert, we go back to the chains, we go back into the depths of the valley, right? Whether that's through doubt or worry or anxiety, taps us out before we reach the coastline. But what we need to remember, right? We got to focus on Jesus. So Florence did this swim again. She tried it again, and this time kept a picture of the coastline in her mind, and she was able to accomplish the goal. The same fog set in, right? But she knew, hey, if I just keep swimming, if I just keep that coastline in my mind, I will reach my goal. And we need to do that as well, right? We need to keep Jesus in our minds. If we focus on him, we can get through the storms, we can get through that fog, and we will reach the end of the valley, right? We'll break through there, we'll get to the coastline, we'll get to the edge of the valley because we keep Jesus in our minds. So, I know I will add the Florence story to my show notes. That way, if you guys wanted to go out and check it out, you can click on that and read. I highly recommend all of the books from Mark Batterson and Craig Groeschel. We really do, especially for Craig Groeschel, we really do need to win the war of our mind. I think a lot of the time that's the battleground, right, where we lose, and where we're going to keep in the valley is where we lose the war in our minds. So I highly recommend, if you were to start any growth or any transformation, start with winning the war in your mind, because that's going to be the first start of the battleground of overcoming temptation and being the person that you want to be. So I know this one is going to be a very quick episode. If you guys have any questions, I would love for you guys to reach out. On Instagram, it's Rev_McMullen94. Let me know your thoughts on the show and what future episodes you would like to hear, or any talking points. Also, just want to let you know, I'm praying for you guys. I'm praying for you, the listeners, that you may achieve your goals and see the transformation that you want, and eventually, start living the life that God's created you to have. And I believe in a very powerful God that will honor all of these prayers and honor the blessings for each listener. So reach out to me if you have specific prayer requests as well, and I'd be more than glad to do that. And just wanted to say thank you for all of your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode, and have a wonderful week. See you guys later.